Hi, I'm Alicia, and this week I'm going to review The Best Kind of People by Zoe Whittle. This is another fantastic Canadian author, and in my last video I talked about the Giller Prize, and this book was one of the finalists for it in 2006. So it's amazing. It's fantastic. This book, and by extension this video, does deal with rape and rape culture, so if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, I suggest watching a different video. Just skip this one. I promise I'll have something lighter to come, but that's what this book deals with, and it's something that definitely needs to be discussed in the review. So if you're uncomfortable and will not be offended, go to a different channel, watch something else. It's all good. So Zoe Whittle, as I said, is Canadian. She was born in Quebec, and she attended Concordia, which is in Montreal, Quebec, as well as University of Guelph. She has written 3 other novels, Bottle Rocket Hearts, Holding Still for as Long as Possible, and a novella for adults with lower literacy levels, which is called The Middle Ground. She's also written 3 books of poetry, and has been a story editor for TV shows such as Degrassi, The Next Generation, and Schitt's Creek, which is currently on TV, and I personally love because it has a pansexual character, and as a pansexual myself, I never actually see pansexuals on TV or in books, so that's fantastic. She has worked as a professor of creative writing at University of Toronto and the University of Guelph. She worked as a journalist for a Canadian literature magazine called Quill Inquirer, and for a decade or more, I forget at this moment, she worked in publicity for an array of publishing houses. So she's definitely, she's been around and she's done some great stuff, and I follow her on Twitter, and that's kind of how I fell in love with her. I put off reading The Best Kind of People due to the subject matter, and I really wanted to be in a emotional stability for the book. You know, when you get really into a book, it tends to have a hard emotional effect on you, and when you're already starting from a low emotional point, sometimes it's best to just read lighter books, and that's kind of why I kept putting this book off. But I still followed her on Twitter, and I kind of fell in love with her through that because she's just clearly an amazing person. She has a lot of the same views as I do, and so I was in love with her before I read the book, and then since reading the book, I feel more justified in saying that she is a brilliant person. This book is about a prominent member of a small community and who is also a teacher at the prep school, who is arrested for sexual misconduct and attempted rape of minors. And it looks at the effects that the arrest has on the accused family, his wife, his daughter, and his son. This is a new way to look at the effects that rape can have. And neither this book nor my review of it are trying to dismiss or not look at these stories of somebody who has been a victim of rape and sexual harassment, but just to give a different, I guess, a different narrative, a different look at the ways that rape can affect such a variety of people. And what happens, what do you do when somebody that you love and trusted for decades is suddenly accused of this? This is something that you've never even considered. So how do you balance, how do you look at it of wanting something to be right, wanting there to be a mistake, wanting there to just a big misunderstanding, without also blaming the girls who have come out to say that they were victimized by him? There are lots of different groups and discussions and viewpoints that are discussed in this book. which really makes the reader kind of go between furious and sympathetic, and it's very emotional. The groups that are discussed in relation to this book are those that believe that the actions of the teacher and of any man accused of rape or sexual misconduct is due to the woman's actions, dress, language, and therefore puts the blame on them, and that the men are just responding with their primal urges towards what they're putting out. The other group in this novel is those that see the accused family as being a part of his actions, which is something that I personally had never experienced. I mean, I had thought about what somebody goes through being a family member of somebody who has been accused of any crime, but this book really looks at how it affects them and how people look at them and associate them with the crime as if they were accomplices, as if they knew about it. And it's really interesting and different and kind of heartbreaking. I mean, you hear of cases of people who are helped, usually partners that help carry out heinous crimes, but I definitely don't see it as with all offenders. And it's interesting that they face the same amount of criticism and backlash and belief that they were part of it somehow. There are, in this novel, of course, the people who believe that the accused is guilty, and though it also looks at those who want to profit for themselves, who are looking for their own gain from the story, and which is, I see it as kind of a reflection of all media. Media thrives off of terrible stories, and I mean, you know, they wait for something terrible to happen so that they can boost ratings and such. While reading this book, I really kept kind of feeling like I wanted to know more about the victims. They were mentioned, these girls were mentioned kind of in passing, just, you know, briefly what they looked like, their names, some of their names, and kind of what they were going through, but they really weren't focused or mentioned. And I kind of kept reading it like, well, I want to know, what are they going through? What actually happened? What's going on that side? And it wasn't really until the end, near the end, where I kind of, and I realized that it wasn't gonna come out, because I kind of kept thinking like, maybe it's at the end, and I'm not as a spoiler, but you don't. And I kind of, it was then that I was kind of thinking why she wouldn't. Just knowing her off of social media, which isn't really how you can know somebody, but I know that she's somebody who doesn't discredit or wants to discredit people's voices. So I was just kind of thinking, well, why wouldn't she talk about it? And I think that it's a reflection of kind of what we're given in general media, and I mean, maybe I'm reading into it too much. Maybe that's the fault of an English major, but when somebody is accused of rape, specifically prominent men are accused of rape, people want to know exactly what happened. What's the girl side of the story? What's going on? And it's almost like we can't, and I say we as a general mass population, not specifically, not everybody obviously in that group, and kind of not me, but like there needs to be this, unless we know the details, unless we know the stories, it can't possibly be true, which is problematic, because now you're asking for a girl to relive her terrible circumstances. I'm somebody who's very comfortable with sex and sexual discussions and my sex life and such like that. But if I were to say, talk to this camera and give you all of the gritty details of my sexual encounters, maybe 1 to by 1,000, which isn't true, but let's pretend, or to anybody and give them explicit details, I would be extremely embarrassed, because also with, explaining all that comes backlash, comes questions, would be people like, oh my God, I can't believe she does that, or she likes that. And this is just me thinking about what would happen if I talked about my consensual sex life. So could you imagine a girl who has to talk to strangers and media about something that she did not want, something humiliating, and then to have people question her and criticize her and blame her? When you think of it like that, I mean, how would you ever want that for anybody? And I feel like that's what this novel is trying to show. You're never given the details of what he has done. You just kind of have to, trust or wonder about what actually happened. And I'm very happy she does that. I'm very in awe of her for doing that. And whether she meant to or not, she definitely pointed out to me how you need to look at the accused and not the victim. Especially when they're young girls. And is something I don't really want to get into much, but I know recently there was an issue in Canada where a professor was, I guess, just fired or was put on suspension. I even forget those details, but there was this huge backlash because people didn't know the details of exactly what he did. And I mean, as just a spectator of that, thinking, why the fuck does it matter? You've done it. Why are you asking for this girl to have to give you everything? And I know Zoe Whittle, just from reading her tweets at the time, was against it and wondering how people could possibly be asking this, because these were people who were very prominent in the literary community, and how they would even want somebody to go through that. And that's kind of how I first started to respect her. And in reading this book, I see that she's continued that line of thinking and is clearly just an amazing person who has told a beautiful story that is heartbreaking and thought-provoking and just all around beautiful. She paints such an amazing story. My only issue, my only criticism, which I don't even know if it's really a criticism, is I felt in the first quarter of the novel, sometimes there were parts that they seemed kind of like they were repeating something that was previously said, but phrased completely differently, but you were still getting the same information, which I just, was just repetitive. Now, I don't know if maybe that was just me and maybe I was just inferring something, because I only really found that in the beginning of the novel. But even if it's there, even if it's present, it really doesn't stop me from loving this book. It's, sometimes stuff like that happens and you're like, well, that's irritating, but overall, this book still functioned and did what it was supposed to do, which was make me feel and create a narrative that made me think about society and rape culture, which again is a heavy topic. And I think if you're somebody who gets very emotionally into books, as I do, maybe it's best to find a time when you don't feel like you'll be overwhelmed by this book. I think you really need to appreciate it, which I guess is when you don't have a million things going on in your life, which is kind of what I waited for, was for my life to kind of calm down and for me to be comfortable. That's my review of The Whittle, Best Kind of People. I also want to say that I borrowed a book from my boss. He had a little like Giller Prize library with all the finalists back in November, and I've taken this and it's been there forever, but it is signed. Okay, so he just lent me a signed copy of the book, and then I looked at the other books and they're all signed. And when I asked him, I was like, why are you lending people signed copies of these books? He's like, they're signed? Like, I didn't know that. Like, how the fuck do you not know that you have signed books? That just seems crazy to me. But anyway, that's my own little spiel, which I can't believe that he actually would lend me a signed book, but I have to give it back, which is upsetting. I mean, I have to do it out of the goodness of my heart. I don't know if he would actually know that I have it, but you know, I'm not going to steal my boss's book. I feel like that's probably not a good move. So anyway, that's my review of The Whittle. I'm actually planning on doing a video midweek. I kind of want to talk about another one of the Giller Prize finalists. It's probably also not going to be another happy review, but next weekend I'm going to really try and do something a little bit more happy and upbeat, because there are fun books out there. So I really hope you stick around, and I really hope you read Zo Whittle's book and you love it. And thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and I hope you complete all of your reading goals. Goodbye.